President Trump's new tariffs are keeping one campaign promise, but turning his back on another, tackling inflation, something he repeatedly promised on the campaign trail.
So when I win, I will immediately bring prices down starting on day one.
So we are now 2 weeks into President Trump's presidency, and he's now imposing stiff tariffs on the country's biggest trading partners, Mexico, Canada, and China. Those countries now promising to retaliate. And economists warn this could all mean higher prices on everyday things like food, clothing, alcohol, sneakers, toys. Some experts predict it could cost more than $2,600 a year for the typical U.S. household. CNN's Elena Trina is joining us now from West Palm Beach. And Elena, the president acknowledging today that, yeah, there might be what he called some short-term pain here.
That's exactly right, Jessica. Just hours, really, after he had signed those tariffs on Mexico, Canada, and China, he acknowledged what many economists, people on Capitol Hill, as well as even some of his own advisors, I'd note in a previous life, of course, have been warning for some time now, which is that these tariffs may directly impact American consumers. As you mentioned, we did hear the president acknowledge this in a post to Truth Social this morning. I want to read for you just some of that post. It was a bit lengthy, but I thought this line was in particularly very notable. It said, quote, "This will be the golden age of America. Will there be some pain? Yes, maybe, and maybe not. But we will make America great again, and it will all be worth the price that must be paid." I really think that last line there, it will all be worth the price that must be paid. It's kind of a warning to a lot of people who have been concerned about these tariffs. Look, the president has been very clear that he believes that the United States neighbors, particularly, of course, Mexico and Canada, are not doing enough to stem the flow of migrants and drugs, specifically fentanyl, from coming into the United States. But one thing that is clear is that Americans may, at least temporarily, be facing some of this pain early on. Now, one thing as well that is not clear, Jessica, is that, when higher prices may actually come into effect. These tariffs are slated to be implemented starting 12:01 a.m. on Tuesday. And there's also really, at this point, no real off-ramp that we see for how Canada and Mexico specifically can respond in a way that would appease Donald Trump. He himself had said that, on Friday, there are no concessions and there wasn't really anything that these countries could do to change his mind or kind of stave off these tariffs.
And Elena, what are we hearing from leaders of China, Canada, and Mexico?
Well, we have heard from a number of these countries that they plan to retaliate. We actually heard from Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau himself last night addressing this in response to the tariffs being signed. Take a listen.
Canada will be responding to the U.S. trade action with 25% tariffs against $155 billion worth of American goods. This will include immediate tariffs on $30 billion worth of goods as of Tuesday, followed by further tariffs on $125 billion worth of American products in 21 days' time to allow Canadian companies and supply chains to seek to find alternatives.
Now, Jessica, we also heard Trudeau say, quote, "We don't want to be here," when addressing reporters last night about this. He also said that he had been trying to get in contact with the president in recent days, but that Trump had not returned his call. Now, similarly, we heard from Beijing. They said, quote, "Corresponding countermeasures to firmly safeguard its own rights and interests will be placed in retaliation to these tariffs." We also heard Mexico's president, Claudia Sheinbaum, say that she's instructing the Secretary of Economy to implement a Plan B that they have been working on. She says it includes tariff and non-tariff measures in defense of Mexico's interests. So we are likely to see these retaliation efforts from these different countries. One thing, of course, also notable is that in the tariffs, in the fine print of what Donald Trump signed yesterday, there is a retaliation clause. That means that at any time, the president does have the right to raise these tariffs further if he believes these countries are responding in a way that he doesn't like. Jessica.
All right. Elena Trina with the very latest from West Palm Beach. Thank you very much for that. Business groups in corporate America taking aim at these tariffs, warning that they will hurt American families, upend supply chains, significantly hurt the relationship between all three countries, and weaken U.S. manufacturing. The Wall Street Journal editorial board putting it pretty bluntly, calling this, quote, the dumbest trade war in history. Joining us now, senior political analyst Ron Brownstein. Ron, okay, let's just play devil's advocate for a second. What if all of this is wrong? And what if Trump actually gets these countries to do what he wants and these tariffs go into effect and it's totally fine? Is that possible?
You basically have to repeal the law of economics for the tariffs to go into effect and have no impact, right? I mean, there's no question in the economic literature about who ultimately pays the price for tariffs. It's the consumers in the country imposing the tariffs. It's not clear what is the problem at the northern border that Trump is trying to solve in terms of migration and fentanyl. And even at the southern border, it's not clear why this mechanism, as opposed to negotiating with Mexico, is a more effective way to pursue, the other policy goals that he's listing. I mean, Donald Trump was elected, Jessica. The exit polling is very clear. For Trump voters, the number one issue was inflation. And now, as he takes office, with a conspicuous focus on other issues to begin with, not really any initiative other than arguing that more energy production will bring down prices. He is moving in the opposite direction. I mean, right in time for the Super Bowl, a Trump tax on guacamole in effect, or a Trump tax on lumber from Canada that will push up the price of new housing construction. I mean, these are policies that are extremely high risk, not only for the economy, but for the administration politically.
And you mentioned Canada. I spoke with the Premier of Ontario last night, Doug Ford. I want to play a clip of what he said.
Well, it's going to be terrible. It's going to make Americans poor. It's going to create inflation. It's going to make Canadians poor. It's going to really hurt both economies. And all we're saying is, let's work together. Please do not lump us in with Mexico and China.
I thought that was kind of I watched that interview. I thought that was a somewhat strange line of argument because Mexico and Canada, I think, have more chance to push back at this if they remain united rather than kind of Canada throwing Mexico under the bus. But look, I think, when you consider the broad ramifications of this, I mean, Mexico is our largest supplier of fruits and vegetables, which will now be more expensive. Canada is our largest supplier of lumber for housing construction, which will now be more expensive. They are both integrated intensely into our domestic auto industry, with parts and products moving back and forth across these borders regularly. That will now face the potential of substantial disruption. And that's before you even get to the issues of what can come from the retaliation. The American Farm Bureau, which is a pretty Trumpy organization, put out a statement worrying about the impact of this. Mexico, Canada, and China account for half of our exports of farm goods. And even though Trump in his first term spent a lot of taxpayer money to basically pacify farmers by sending them checks, there was a long-term cost. Some of the markets that we lost, particularly in China, have never come back, for example, for American soybeans. They've moved to other suppliers like Brazil. So this is a big gamble with the global economy, with the American economy, with the cost of living, which was, I think, by any reasonable analysis, the principal issue that caused Donald Trump to win was the belief that Joe Biden had mismanaged the inflation. Life was cheaper when Trump was president the first time, and therefore it would be cheaper when he's president again. The tension there was always that economists who looked at his program, particularly the tariffs and the mass deportation, always warned that it had the potential to rekindle inflation, and that may be the road he's heading down.
And the question becomes, how flexible and how willing are people to go along with it? Ron Brownstein, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.